I participated in VR Jam 2023, which ran from the 23rd of June to the 30th of June. Participants had 1 week to make a game, and the game had to match the theme of special delivery. There were 130 entries to the jam, and my entry is a game called Special de-Kaboom. The name of my game is a mashup of the theme and also with the gameplay of my game, where you have to load weapons in your spaceship in order to destroy an enemy spaceship that is shooting at you. In the end of the game, you get to blow them up. So the story is that you're a crewmate on board the Starfire Voyager. You are tasked with using the ship's weaponry, and you have to destroy a medium-sized hostile ship. Your regular cannons and missiles are not enough to obliterate them, however, so you have an ace up your sleeve, also known as the Special Delivery Payload. So what is the Special Delivery Payload? Well, it's basically a massive missile with a nuclear warhead inside capable of destroying any medium-sized spaceship in an instant. But in order to launch this missile, you first need to destroy all of the enemy's weapon systems, or else they're just going to shoot it down. So if you're familiar with my other game titled Escape the Jasseron, you might notice that the name of the ship sounds familiar. Well, actually, it's the same ship. So I had the idea to make this game sort of like a prequel to the events that happen in Escape the Jasseron, where the ship you're on is being destroyed. So this game is actually the events that lead up to that, where the reason you're attacked in Escape the Jasseron is because you attacked one of their ships beforehand unknowingly, so they decided to take revenge on you. So the gameplay loop is pretty simple. So the first thing you need to do is go and grab one of the ammo rounds from either end of the room, depending on which weapon system you plan to use first. And then you can pick up the ammo, and then you can insert it into the weapon system of your choice. So for instance, if it's the cannon, you can pick up one of the cannon rounds and then you insert it into the back of the cannon where there's like a little hole. After that, on the dashboard in the middle of the room, a light will appear to let you know that the cannon is loaded and ready to be fired. So when you go up to that control panel, there are various buttons and switches. 2 buttons, which are grab buttons, allow you to rotate the cannon left and right. This allows you to aim the weapon towards one of the enemy's weapon systems that you can fire at and destroy. So once it's loaded and it displays that it's ready, you can align the shot, and then you press the fire button by pushing down on it with your hand, and then you'll see that the cannon will fire, and you can see the projectile flying out from the cannon towards the enemy ship. Once it hits the enemy ship, it will deal damage to the enemy weapon system until it's destroyed. In order to then fire another shot, you need to go back and pick up another ammo round and insert that into the weapon. Then it will be ready again for fire. You need to be careful though, because whilst you are doing this, the enemy are also continuously firing missiles at you. So you need to keep an eye on the missiles, and your defense against those is a shield. The shield can be activated at the press of a button, and it is activated by default at the very start of the game in order to give you a moment to sort yourself out, because I'm sure it is pretty overwhelming at this point. The shield lasts for 20 seconds, after which point it will turn off and need to cool down for an extra 5 seconds before you can activate it again. So in that 5 seconds, you need to watch out for any attacking enemy missiles, or else you're going to get damaged. And the ship can only sustain a handful of hits before you will be the one getting blown up. But of course you can monitor this by a massive health bar indicator above the dashboard window. But of course, the more of their weapon systems you destroy, the less missiles that will be coming your way, as they will be unable to fire as much. And finally, once all of their weapon systems are destroyed, the special payload delivery indicator will activate, letting you know that you can fire it. At this point, all that's left to do is press the big red button and away it goes. So you may be interested about a few other assets in this project that I actually borrowed from past projects that I'd worked on, most notably Escape the Jasserin, since this is heavily influenced by it. So most obviously is the model for the enemy missiles, which you can clearly see is the same model that I used for the actual Jasserin enemies. What's not as clear though is that they're actually running technically on the same script as in Escape the Jasserin. However, I've heavily modified this script to work in this game, and it's actually also the same script that is going to be used for an incompleted friendly missile launcher as well. So the way it originally worked is that it would specifically target the player at all times and just continuously move towards them. However, I had to modify this so that it would target specific arrays of points that it would randomly select when instantiating the object. Originally, this script also handled where the object will spawn, so I had to completely get rid of that part, and I made a whole separate manager for spawning the actual game object. There were also tons of other improvements made to this script just to generally clean it up and make it much better. I also used the script on the special delivery payload, this time turning it into essentially a friendly missile, and I changed the target point to target that of the enemy ship. But the whole aim of this was to be able to make one script that can handle multiple different use cases and essentially work universally, rather than having to make multiple different missile scripts for different use cases, such as if it's friendly or hostile, if it's going to hurt the player or not, or if it's going to attack a specific entity. This way it works with anything. Something a bit more subtle that you probably wouldn't have noticed is the little sort of particle effects in the space area. So as you're playing, you can see that there's little like particles moving past outside the window, and that's to sort of give the illusion of movement. So it's like you're both moving throughout space whilst you're fighting. In reality, you're actually completely stationary. So this is just an extra effect for helping give that illusion away. This was actually also borrowed from Escape the Jasserin, which you can see in two locations in that game, such as when you smash the window in the middle of the game and you have like particles of air coming out the window from the depressurization of the room. And it can also be seen at the end of Escape the Jasserin when you're in the little escape ship. Finally, there's one more asset that was also borrowed from a different past project, which you probably wouldn't have known about unless you had really delved into my old projects. This one was actually an unreleased project, but you can find details about it on my portfolio site. And it's from the game Ecliptic Onslaught, which is a game that was never able to be finished thanks to the pandemic that happened in 2020 when I was making it. So I'd actually planned to build like a boss ship in that game that would attack you at a certain point and basically just shoot a barrage of missiles at you. So I thought I'd reuse that model that I'd made all the way back then and finally get some proper use out of it. So I just scaled it up, added the weapon systems to it, and added some logic for it to be able to shoot the player. And it seemed to work quite nicely for the style that I wanted to go with. So in Special de-Kaboom, I wanted to sort of go with a similar graphical style as Escape the Jasserin, since it's meant to be a prequel. And so obviously it's a sci-fi game again, and I wanted that sort of simple look and feel to it. And I also wanted to keep the same sort of colour scheme. However, I also didn't really want it to be too bland. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to actually make any assets for it, and I just basically built the block out. So all of it that's currently in the game for the most part is just a pro builder, which I used to build the environment and also some of the assets. Obviously you can see that some of the assets are like actual assets that I had made, I hadn't really used any third-party assets other than audio, being the music. But I did also borrow the explosion particle effects that came with the Creepy Cat sci-fi kit, which is the same one that I used in Escape the Jasserin to keep consistency with the enemy missile explosions. Additionally, I forgot to mention that I did also use the template level created by the YouTuber Valem, which helped massively in getting the project up and running quickly, just by providing like the basic setup for the project. There were a few features that were also planned to go into this game during the jam, but unfortunately I just wasn't able to get them in time. So most notably is the missile launcher, which is to the left of the room. So the way that was supposed to work was that you'd have to load up each slot of the missile launcher before it was ready to fire, but then you could fire it in like a burst. So when you push the button to fire, you just select a target to lock onto, and the missiles will just lock onto the enemy weapon systems and all collectively fire in like a continuous burst until it runs out, and then you'll be able to load it again. So they would have dealt 1 damage compared to the cannon, which deals 3 points of damage for every hit. However, due to the fact that I wasn't able to complete the missile launcher system, I made the enemy health for each of the weapons just 1, whereas originally they were going to be about 10 each, or at least about 5. So you would have had to hit them multiple times in order to destroy them, which is why they each have a health bar. Since I had to cut this down for the demo to be a bit more playable, sadly you can't really notice this fact. But basically, so the missile launcher would have been able to do multiple hits, and it would have been a lot more devastating to the enemy, but also it's a little bit slower and it takes longer to essentially reload. Also, I had originally planned for the both of those to be aimable using like a joystick as opposed to just simple left and right buttons, but I had trouble getting the joystick to work, so I just opted for those grab buttons, which made it really easy to just turn it left and right, and it seemed to align perfectly. And then I just clamped the values so that it could only turn as far left and right as the enemy's ship is, just to make things a little bit easier. One obvious thing that's missing from the game is sound effects. I was going to implement these, but again I just sort of ran out of time to actually obtain sound effects for everything that I needed. Normally I prefer to create them, but I just was more focused on the getting the mechanics working from start to finish, since on the final day I was literally working until 1 hour before the deadline, in which I had time to just put up the itch page and make the actual build and submission. So it was a very tight deadline for me, as I started work on the actual mechanics really late, as the first few days were spent planning. So once I got those in, I just didn't have time to actually implement audio, only get the music working, which is, it's not great, but at least the game works. So yeah, these are all things that I can still sort of add into the game later on if I come back to it, which I may do, but I haven't done yet. So except for the fact that from the feedback gained during the actual jam, it was evident that people were just not really sure what the controls did and how to use them, and most people also just didn't read the description on the itch page, which is where it was explained, as I didn't really have time to make any sort of tutorial within the game. So I have since done a tiny update to it, but I haven't released this onto the page yet as of the time of recording. But I basically just added like clearer indicators to what each of the buttons do in the panels and what they are for, and I also moved where all the buttons are located so it's slightly easier to press, as sometimes you'd end up sort of walking onto the control panel accidentally, which got rather annoying. So if you found this interesting at all, then feel free to go check out the itch page, which will be linked in the description, where you can read more about the game and you can also download it for yourself and play. Unfortunately, again, I was only really able to get a PC build for the jam and not an APK. However, if there's enough interest, then please let me know in the comments if you are interested. I may actually do another update to the game, fixing all of the issues presented, and additionally I can also add in all of the audio, and I can make an Android build that should hopefully be working, and that will mean that more people can play it and it will be a lot more fun. But of course, if there's no real interest, then it's not really worth wasting my time on that when I could be focusing that on another project. So please let me know if you found this interesting at all, and see what happens from there.